I'm Fred McClimans of Samadhi Capital Partners, and today we're talking about all things Moore's Law on today's Samadhi Brief. Joining me is John Freeman, our Chief Investment Officer. John, welcome to the Samadhi Brief today.
Hey, Fred. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Hey, John, I want to dig into an interesting, if not old school topic, Moore's Law.
Moore's Law.
Moore's Law. So Moore's Law is one of the cornerstones of our firm's investment philosophy.
Absolutely.
And I'd kind of like to discuss a little bit about Moore's Law. Why is Moore's Law relevant? What is Moore's Law? And how do we actually use that in terms of making an investment decision? So let's just start off with Moore's Law.
Sure. So the way I think of it, and I've been thinking about this for a very long time, but there's a famous quote from a guy named Dostoevsky about biology, and he said, "Nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution." And I think there's a very good analogy here. Nothing in the tech sector makes sense except in the light of Moore's Law. Meaning this, evolution is the underlying engine of all sort of biological change, all of the phenomena that we see in wetware, right? Is driven by evolution, by the parameters of evolution. Moore's Law, i.e., the observation by Gordon Moore in 1966 that the number of transistors on a chip of a given size double every 18 months, and was later extended to every 2 years. And that has held up since then, and since 1970 has produced a 3.1 million x improvement in transistor density, which translates to the ability to store and process information, which is the cornerstone of all of information technology. So it's as if the tech industry gets a 100% surplus to use and build new things and make breakthroughs every 2 years. And that has just there's no other industry that's like that. Nothing is really like that. It's a tremendous phenomenon. And what we do is we look at, and so Moore's Law is very powerful, but it has the power to create value. It also has the power to destroy value through commoditization, because if you hold the number of transistors constant, then the cost of that chip is halved every 2 years. So that's the sort of the evil twin corollary. So what we do, the way to kind of look at this is you look at those companies that can take that surplus every 2 years of transistors and create value. And to the degree that they can create value for customers is the degree that they can create value for shareholders. So if Moore's Law, doubles the number of transistors, and Facebook comes out with a new feature that, for lack of a better term, creates 4x of value, well, then that's a ratio we like. That's a company that's on the right side of Moore's Law. Having said that, if a company really can't do anything with the transistors and their task is already easy to do, then what happens, of course, is their product, the price of their product gets cut in half every 2 years. You kind of see that with the PC when Excel ran about as fast as it was ever going to run. I mean, obviously there's some applications on the PC that are still challenging, but by 2002, 2003, I mean, we ran the desktop applications about as fast as they were going to go. And so then what happens? The PC prices just dropped, right? And then you can actually take that chip and you can run pretty much the same kind of applications on a phone. So that's the power of Moore's Law, and that's why we kind of use it as our backdrop for making investment decisions.
So it's interesting if you think about that exponential growth in processing capability. Not that dissimilar, and I like the Dostoevsky reference there, because in biology we see essentially the same thing. The process of evolution. I'm one of those guys that believes fundamentally that the technology we develop is an extension of ourselves, of our biology, and the way we think and the way we process.
Yep.
So the other thing, in listening to what you're saying here, I think it's important to note that there are two sides to Moore's Law, not just the right side or the wrong side, but there's the production side of Moore's Law, the people who are actually making the transistors and the chips and the flash memory, and then there are people who are actually consuming that So when we talk about like the halving of memory cost or processing costs, companies like Facebook take advantage
Love that.
of that.
Exactly.
So they're on the right side of Moore's law
Right.
by taking advantage of the commoditization of memory.
One company's commoditization disaster is another company's open door to creating new value. Exactly. In fact, the thing about one of the reasons I like the biology analogy is because evolution is kind of underneath the surface of all of these biological phenomenon, and people study the higher layers. Let's say even psychology, for example, was ultimately driven by evolution, but you just don't see. It's abstracted, so you don't see it directly. Well, Facebook absolutely has benefited from Moore's law. The great example is when they were their entire website was really sort of grinding to was slowing down, and they were having a problem with because most of their storage was hard drives, and flash was way too expensive. And then just in time, it was concurrent with their IPO in 2012. Flash got just cheap enough for them to go all flash. And so over the 2-year period from 2012 to 2014, they moved all of their data from hard drives to all flash. And that has made a tremendous difference in the ability to scroll through somebody's profile page without hanging up and look at all their photos and download the videos and all of that stuff. It's all ultimately driven by Moore's law.
So Facebook, I think, is a great example there. If you look at the new areas that they're moving into, look into augmented reality, into virtual reality, look into some of the more complex personalized video advertising. That's really processor intensive. It's memory intensive. It's also communications intensive.
Bandwidth intensive as well. Exactly.
And bandwidth, which is interesting because there's sort of this side interpretation of Moore's law that Ray Kurzweil made, talking about the doubling of capacity of information technology, I think every 12 to 18 months. It kind of tracks that. So you get Moore's law driving the underlying tech, and Kurzweil's law leveraging that into the market.
Right, and so at the leading edge, some software guy is creating more value than just a doubling.
Right.
So those are the guys we like. Obviously, you want that company that takes that 100% transistor surplus, however we want to put it, every 2 years, and makes breakthroughs and creates value and encourage and adds features such that you want to upgrade. Now, interestingly, with smartphones, we're starting to see that slow down a little bit. I notice a lot of people are not upgrading to the, for example, to the iPhone 7. But previously, from 2008 until roughly now, every time Apple came out with a new phone that that took advantage of the latest processor and latest memory, people snapped it up and people upgraded. But at a certain point, it does slow, and then you get commoditization. I don't think we're there yet with the smartphone, but you're starting to see signs of it. You're at least.
Well, I think you're also seeing a bit of what I'll contrast in terms of the tech reality or tech possibility versus market reality. Out there, there's a certain point at which people can't consume fast enough, and you get periods where Moore's law kind of jets ahead. And the consumer demand for economic reasons, for social reasons, it just simply isn't quite there. And maybe
Totally
it's just
true.
an issue of AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile having
being a regulated industry.
They're regulated,
there's non-Moore's law related things. That is absolutely
they're
true.
struggling with their contract process as well.
Right.
Do they give away the phone and charge for the service, or do they give away the service and charge for the phone?
Right.
And right now, AT&T is a great example. They used to give you that free phone upgrade every 2 years. Now you get the right to upgrade, but you still have to pay for the phone.
Exactly. Yeah, and you're exactly right. So the value even to the carrier now is slowing, because previously it was get that customer signed up and give that phone away and get that customer signed up, because then you get that customer for ostensibly for many years. There's a couple of lags. One is the one that you just pointed out, which is people will adopt perhaps even more slowly than what the technology capacity allows. But there's another lag that's even in between, and that's software. What you can do with that transistor density, it takes time for software developers to actually take full advantage of all of the the transistors and all of the storage capacity and processing speed and all of that stuff. In fact, some have kind of put it at almost 10 years, 10-year lag. I think it depends on what area of software you're in, but there is most definitely a lag. As would it's it's expected. I'm not knocking the software industry, that's for sure.
Right, right. So, so let's kind of cut to it here, and disclaimer up front: we are not making individual stock recommendations. We're not commenting on anything in that particular area. This is for infotainment purposes only. Can I say infotainment?
Infotainment, yes.
Infotainment, entertainment, yes. But let's talk a little bit about some of the companies that you think are on the right side of Moore's Law. And just a forewarning, some of these may be in the Samadhi Capital Partners portfolio.
Sure, sure. So obviously we mentioned Facebook. Facebook, I believe, is still on the right side of Moore's Law. And Google, I believe, is also on the right side of Moore's Law. Every time what they want to be able to do with analytics is just incredibly processor intensive and memory intensive. Another one, though, that might not be as high profile is New Relic. What New Relic does is they actually have software, little software agents that actually sit right next to all of the other software that they want to monitor, and those agents monitor that software and report back to a central sort of reporting engine. That sounds like a really sort of like, wow, that's kind of tactical and an IT tool. But here's the thing. When software substitutes for the means of production, as we are seeing right now, so software traditionally was used to manage the means of production when it first emerged in the 60s. But now, with Uber, with Amazon is a great example, the software itself is the means of production. So if software itself is the means of production, you need other software to manage it because there's no way you can scale, there's no way that a human can do it. So that's exactly where New Relic is. And you could not have done that 10 years ago. There just wasn't enough processing power to have the software and then also have software that is monitoring the software, right?
Right,
there's just only so many cycles you can squeeze in, but now you can do that. And it's incredibly valuable because, Uber basically uses New Relic not as an IT tool, but as a business tool. Their executives have New Relic, dashboards, basically. Yeah, exactly. And they check them, and it gives them an indication of how their business is doing, not just how their software is doing.
One aspect of that I think is really worth noting here is that if you look at the development of any technology, whether it's hardware or software, there's a period in time at which it's constrained by the human element. Right. How many people can the learning curve, or right. How many lines of code can one individual produce in any one day? Right. And then you get to the point where you start to collaborate with others, and you go, we now have 5 people. Can 5 people working together actually produce 5x lines of code? In some cases, it's a little bit less because of the complexity. In some cases, it might be a little bit more in terms of value. But when you get to the point where software is an embedded component of that production cycle here,
right.
all of a sudden you accelerate the amount of value that any one person can bring into that software development stream.
Exactly. And in fact, I would say that in order to make software that's competitive, in this day and age, you need you need really good other software. It's not just open source tools that that you're downloading. Not that open source. I'm not ragging on open source. I'm just saying that it's not just something that it's not a widget that you download to help you debug something. It is a full stack. Atlassian is another company that on the production side that is squarely on the right side of Moore's Law because it's software that helps create software, just as New Relic is software that helps monitor software.
Yeah, and in fact, Atlassian and New Relic work very well together.
Yeah,
they're customers of each other.
Yeah, that's right.
So nice to see that ecosystem kind of evolving there. And I do need to just point out that both Atlassian, New Relic, and Facebook and Google that we have mentioned are all in the Samadhi Capital Partners portfolio. So, John, I can't thank you enough. I think we've kind of put a good stake in the ground for Moore's Law, and hopefully, while that's not the only decision or the only data point that we look at when making, an investment decision.
It's the background.
It's the background. Right.
I've struggled with what words to choose, but that's about as good as it's going to get. I think. But it's incredibly important to keep in mind all the time.
Yeah, and not just so we're clear on this. This is not hey, this company's on the right side, this one's on the wrong side. Therefore, we will invest in one and not the other. But I think if you look at Moore's Law, that kind of it sets the tone to understand what's possible with a particular company.
That's
and
right.
then you get into the business model, you get into the management team, you get into the competitive advantages, the total addressable market,
all of those other
things.
very important parameters.
Well,
absolutely.
John, here's to Moore's Law and the future of technology investing.
There you go. Thanks, Fred.
I'm Fred McClimans with John Freeman. This has been a Samadhi Capital Partners brief.